Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and I'm doing another video now to kind of go back through some of the ETH stuff with you leading up to this XRP Unleashed documentary. Here's the first one.
See Hinman's comments, but more broadly, do you feel like we're kind of at a place now where we're on the verge of getting some important clarity and regulations in the United States?
I think we've got a lot of pretty high quality clarity, in my opinion. The SEC has been very clear that, I guess Commissioner Clayton indicated that they wouldn't grandfather anybody, that big surprise, they're going to enforce securities laws roughly like they have for many decades, and there will be lots of projects that sold securities, unregistered securities to Americans that have received communications or will receive communications. My thesis is that the SEC doesn't want to kill blockchain for America, and so they have to be very careful, sort of have to thread the messaging needle where they present some positive statements about Bitcoin, about Ethereum, about consumer utility tokens. So I think we're still in that.
In other words, they've got to, he calls it threading the needle. They've got to come up with enough BS and see if they can create some, this was after the 2 months after the Hinman speech. So he's basically saying they just had to do that BS speech you just heard to thread the needle and do just enough BS to create this fourth prong of the Howey test and see if we can bullcrap the American public into getting Bitcoin and Ethereum out from under securities laws.
Phase where the SEC is communicating that we understand this is something new and it's going to be an incredibly valuable technology, but we also have rules, and all the projects out there need to pay attention to rules that are in place to preserve the sanctity of markets and consumer safety. So I'm pretty comfortable in this country and in various countries around the world that the securities law issues are pretty close to resolved, and I do think that there are going to be some bad times for some projects going forward, but I think that's going to be a very good thing. Getting clarity with respect to regulation is going to really kickstart or re-kickstart.
He always seemed to act like he was working at the SEC. Here he is again.
Nobody at the SEC wants to kill blockchain for America. So they also,
how does he know,
want to enforce the laws that they've been enforcing effectively for decades.
Remember, to this day, from what I can tell, there's only 3 guys that the SEC has let come in and talk. One's Joseph Lubin, 2 is Aaron Kaplan from Prometheum, and 3 is Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX. 3 of the most shady characters that I've covered since I got in this.
It's protecting consumers. So they need to take a balanced approach. They need to message things positively, in my opinion. But there's also, I think, going to be even more of a reckoning coming where certain projects obviously sold securities. And
who is telling him that they're going to have a reckoning? See, this was the problem, is that it's the way he talked. It always sounded like they weren't just giving him a free pass, but they were also talking to him and saying, look, we're going to go after Ripple, maybe?
Sold them contrary to securities laws.
And Jay Clayton made it clear that nobody was going to be grandfathered. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jay Clayton said that Bill
When did Jay Clayton say nobody's going to be grandfathered? Ethereum got grandfathered.
Director of Corporate Finance at the SEC, after they declared Bitcoin sufficiently decentralized so that's not a security, and put Ether in that category as well, the token on Ethereum. In that same set of remarks about Ether, he indicated that the SEC is very aware that there is a new model.
They haven't talked about it since. Now, when I first started looking into this ETH stuff and piecing this together, I was doing searches on YouTube, and I was looking for, what I learned was that a lot of these attorneys who who had been in these rooms and privy to these discussions, they began to talk because they thought it was over. They thought they didn't have to worry about letting people know what had happened before. Nancy Wotas, I believe, is one of the good guys in the thing. I think that she was in those rooms, but she thought they were working on behalf of the whole industry and found out later that they weren't what they were really trying to do. I think that's why she was pissed.
We've been very much engaged with the SEC on a number of fronts, one of them being Andreessen Horowitz reached out to the chairman when he made a speech at Stanford saying, we're going after the lawyers, we're going after the accountants, and sat down with him. And what the chairman of the SEC said was, look, form a small group working.
Sat down with Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz
group and come up with some suggestions. Pretty much saying, look, we're tired of talking to people about the Howey test. Put some real practical suggestions together. So Andreessen Horowitz, together with Union Square Ventures, sat down with 3 law firms, McDermott, Will & Emery, Perkins Coie, and Cooley, all of whom had a fairly significant crypto practice, together with 2 academics, Joe Grunfest and Adam, as well as NVCA, and we sat down and came up with a safe harbor that we felt we could, in fact, suggest to the SEC that they start their thinking in that direction. And we submitted that. Perkins Coie did a memo. And if any of you don't have those materials, just let me know. I can email them to you. They were supposed to be confidential and submitted to the SEC. Within days, they were public.
They were public. Somebody leaked them because they knew that what was going on wasn't right.
In fact, as the newspaper reporters were calling me, I'm going, oh my God, how did that get out? And all of us were immediately reaching out to Andreessen Horowitz saying, we didn't send it, honest. But the really valuable work product at this point, and the reason I mention that is Director Hinman's speech that I'm sure everybody at least is familiar with or has heard about. Most of what he says in there came out of the safe harbor as well as the meetings that we had with him.
And the safe harbor only mentioned Ethereum. Here is Ethereum's attorney, Lowell Ness, describing that same thing. You got to understand, when this was all unfolding, we were finding these things, and these were like groundbreaking videos.
Campus made his way over to see Andreessen the next morning, and this is the part that now not a lot of people know. And he invited Chris Dixon to round up the sort of the industry players who were really kind of trying to do it the right way, and asked for a couple of things. One, essentially, lay out in a very detailed, written, footnoted memo what existing law says about utility tokens, and 2, give us a proposal for where to go from here. And so Andreessen, I've been representing Andreessen in all of their crypto investments since the beginning, and so I got the chance to be the one to write all that stuff. So. And I pulled in Cooley, and I pulled in a couple of law firms. So we've now got a nice little working group of law firms that are in the space that are doing this. The general reception I think we got when we visited the SEC back in April was actually really positive. And it was an interesting dichotomy between their public-facing sort of incredibly vituperative, statements that they were making, and this interesting sort of welcome that we got privately, and so I think they're hungry for some help and some industry players to really kind of leverage. They're underfunded and everything else, and so I think they're looking for industry to help solve this problem, and hopefully that is what is happening now. So. The real reason I tell you this story is because it affects our playbook for 2018. And so while 2017 there were not going to be any rules of the road, in coming soon, and we're...
Okay. So that was Lowell Ness. And see, it wasn't... ETHgate, when you think about ETHgate's not just that they're working with regulators behind the scenes and having these secret closed door meetings. It was the people that were tied to the people that were having the closed door meetings and what they were doing. At the same time, you got these guys from Multicoin Capital, Tushar Jain, and this guy right here in this video. I'm going to show, his name is Kyle Samani. They're the partners at Multicoin Capital. They're going on to shows and bragging about how they're shorting XRP, specifically because they think that the SEC will eventually come after XRP. Well, just so happens that two of their limited partners are Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures, both venture capital firms that are in the meetings behind closed doors with the SEC to get the Ethereum free pass, doing the presentations. And they're out running around doing this.
There was some other news this week, too. We have Andreessen Horowitz, one of the leading Silicon Valley venture capital firms, opening their first cryptocurrency fund, $300 million they put into it. It's the first major VC firm to open a crypto fund. You also have a crypto hedge.
This was another one of the bombshell videos.
And, I mean, does this industry need more competition in the fund world? Does this make it harder for you to raise money?
I think it's a super good thing for the ecosystem. Chris Dixon, who's one of the GPs there, and I think Katie Hahn's the other. Chris is an LP in our fund in Multicoin, so know them for a while. Overall, it's a great thing for the ecosystem. We're talking to a lot of endowments today who are looking at the crypto ecosystem, and there's just a real challenge for them and kind of career risk because it's unknown space, a lot of unknown fund managers, and being able to take a top-tier firm with a very well-known general partner there who's been there for 5 or 6 years now, and to kind of launch a dedicated vehicle. It's a very good way for existing institutional LPs to be able to invest in crypto through a known entity or a known vehicle. So I think it's kind of the trickle of opening the floodgates of institutional capital is starting to come in through Chris and Katie's new fund.
Tell us.
Which coins are you shorting?
We're definitely very long biased, and it is our general bias is to be fully deployed or close to fully deployed. And that's where we want to be. We are not fully deployed at the moment, and we are not fully long right now. We have a few shorts open. That's largely a reflection of market cycle and then a few idiosyncratic views about certain assets. So right now we have, for example, shorts open on Ripple and Litecoin. Litecoin, in my view, has no reason to exist. It was a fork of Bitcoin. It's just been sitting around.
It's a harsh assessment.
The only investment thesis I've ever heard for Litecoin is it's a testnet for Bitcoin, but that's not an investment thesis. And so, it trades. It's got a 2, 3, 4 billion market cap, whatever the number is. But it doesn't really have a reason to exist. It's clearly more risky than Bitcoin.
Now listen to this part closely, because the question you need to be asking yourself is, of all the digital assets, there were thousands, as he's sitting here, of all the digital assets out of the thousands, how did he know to pick XRP to short, with the premise being that he thought the SEC would come after them? How did he know?
Actually, in terms of brand and everything else, when we look at Ripple, Ripple they keep selling into the market. Based on kind of the SEC's guidance from a couple weeks ago about Ether being not being a security, it's quite clear to us that Ripple is a security. We don't know when that news is going to drop, but the catalysts seem to have kind of gone away from Ripple, and we have very high conviction that it is a security.
Boy, this is
and so
dirty pool.
as kind of the system plays out over time, we think that short will deliver idiosyncratic returns.
So the security label is kind of a designation that kind of dooms these cryptocurrency. I think it's kind of a fatal
You get the gist of it. There's a lot of smoke coming off of that one, just like there was on this classic Joe Lubin video from ETH.
So we are big friends and fans of that organization. I think they're really understanding the space well. They are applying this thing called securities law to business in America and other places, as they have done for many decades successfully. They're identifying fraudulent projects. They're identifying obvious transgressions of securities law, but they haven't had a heavy touch, really. They've been gathering information. They've been taking some actions. They've been very clear that they understand there is this new construct, this protocol-based open platform.
So you think they get it?
Yeah, we believe they get it. They've introduced a new construct decentralization into their thinking. So in addition,
I haven't heard about that lately. I don't hear the SEC talking about that at all now.
To the Howey test, they have this new construct that they're seeing.
New construct to the Howey test. How come the SEC is not talking about this now?
Things in, so they consider the Bitcoin network and token and issuance mechanisms. They consider the Ethereum network token and issuance mechanisms to be decentralized, and therefore no transactions involving those particular assets are considered to be.
I'll bet you Bill Hinman and the SEC cringed every time they saw this guy go on stage and start talking about this decentralization prong of the Howey test after they made that speech.
The transactions of securities. They have not said the same thing about other tokens, the Ripple token, for instance, and they were clear that they were going to come out with statements.
Clear to who? Where? When?
To sort of assess these different tokens, and I believe they've made all the statements about decentralization that they're going to make. And so,
you believe that? How do you
Bill
believe
Hinman,
that?
Director of Corporate Finance, has been very clear about what you can do and what you can't do, and decentralization is a new element that they're working with.
A new element to the Howey test. I'm not going to play this, but this is Vitalik Buterin describing when he sold 70,000 Ethereum at the top of the market, the Ethereum Foundation did, to double his runway. Okay? And then, let's see, this one right here. I don't want to make this video too long. And then this is later. This is like fast forward a couple of years later, and Lowell Ness is talking about, this is the Andreessen Horowitz attorney talking about how he sat across the table from Bill Hinman.
My playbook these days, in fact, honestly, ever since I sat across from Bill Hinman and he sort of said, you know, we're gonna accept your proposal to give some guidance here, I stopped giving guidance. I said, let's be consistent with the SEC's hand wave approach here.
He stopped. Andreessen Horowitz, none of them were worried about regulation after that, because they had gotten a free pass for Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's all they wanted. And now Chris Dixon's out making his rounds with his book, acting like he cares about inclusiveness in this industry. Give me a break. Now, I'm not going to play this because you've seen it 1,000 times, but it's necessary to show it, because this is one of the classics. I think Wheezy's the one that originally uncovered this video. It's the clip of Joseph Lubin talking about disguising the whales from the ICO. It's a classic, and it is a very important part of ETHgate. I'm going to go into DAIXRP.com, and we're going to go further into this. We're going to talk, I'm going to lay out what happened with MoneyGram and just how shady all this is. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tell your friends and family. Here we go.